Today's guest is Heather Parady, and I got to tell you, I'm really excited for this one. Number one, she has a clear and visible track record of success on social media, but she's also formerly a mental health therapist that transitioned into entrepreneurship as a fractional COO because she was good at getting things done. And as many of you entrepreneurs know, you're great at starting things, not always great at finishing and delivering and bringing it home. And so that's what she was working on. And in the middle of all that, as her social media presence is skyrocketing and she's involved in other companies' projects and getting them across the finish line, she launches a podcast called Unconventional Leaders. On top of that, interviewing some really big names from Jack Canfield to Seth Godin. I mean, I could go on listing, but I think you get the point. So the benefit of listening to this conversation is just that, listening to someone who actually did what most of you entrepreneurs are trying to accomplish, myself included. And that's get somewhere and be visible. And the advice she has might surprise you. So without further ado, Heather Parady. Heather, super stoked to have you here. I want you to know the first time I came across your work and the reason why I invited you here is I just finished taking this course on, I think it was school, and I just heard of school and they were talking about content creation and they were encouraging us to look at people who are doing content right. So I'm scrolling on Instagram and I come across your work and all the things they were telling you to do, you did them and more
Hot
and
dog.
consistently. And I said, wow, this stuff works for sure. And then I started looking at what you were doing and you were sharing with people things that they were charging for to begin with, which tells me like, wait a minute, there's something here. If this is what you're giving away, I can only imagine what it is like to work with you. So being that the community that's listening to this are a bunch of business owners, entrepreneurs, retired athletes who are trying to be entrepreneurs and stepping into that power, and they see content as one way of doing that. I think the best way to start this conversation off is by first asking you, when did you first pick up a camera and say, I'm going to make videos?
Years ago. Goodness. I think it was 7 years ago I started podcasting and then putting out live videos. At that time, Periscope was a thing. I don't know if you remember Periscope.
Yeah, on Twitter.
Yeah, it was actually before I think it moved over to Twitter. So I started there. I was absolutely terrible because then you would just go live and there were so many the creators, the ratio to like creators consumers was insane. So if you were putting out consistent videos, I mean, I'd have 1,000 plus people on a live at a time, which isn't like a ton, but when you're 24, you've never put out content before, you're in your gym clothes and car with a crappy Android. I was terrified, man. I was like, this is crazy. This is crazy how this works. Like having a captured like audience of that size. And I didn't have anything to sell, but I immediately made an email freebie. It was called 100 Things to Periscope About because everybody was like, oh, Periscope. I would totally Periscope. I just don't have anything to Periscope about. And so I said, well, here you go, Paul. That's a good freebie. So it started then, man. It was, a really crazy journey. I've tried all different kinds of content. I love video. I've always gone back to video. The most recent iteration of it, I started the chair series into July last year. And up to that point, I have put out hundreds of videos. I've tried every format. I've tried sketch comedy. I've tried trends. I've tried cutting up, repurposing content. I've just tested and tested and tried and tried and tried. And it wasn't until into last summer where I got really frustrated because I knew I had a message. I knew that I had the interest. I knew that I had somewhat of a talent for communicating, but my videos weren't doing very well. So I decided to put a creative restriction on myself and sit in a chair until I figured out what I was going to say or what I had to say. And that creative restriction right there just led to the series that you're seeing now.
And it's well done. I
Thank
think
you.
at one point you even shared sort of the way you run the scripts for those in case people wanted. And again, talk about freebies. It's just crazy to hear how you started and how you probably made a list of here's 100 things I could probably talk about and then say,
Yeah.
wait a minute, someone else could use this. There are so many people who are entrepreneurs, business owners that are thinking, I'm going to start social media. I'm going to get into it. And then they make one or two videos. they don't get any traction and they say this stuff doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the other kind that pay a lot of money to a lot of companies that don't do anything for them except
Mm-hmm.
do things they probably should have just done on their own to begin with. Where do you stand on the balance between when you work with a business owner? I meant,
Yeah.
if I understand correctly, this is some of the work that you do,
Mm-hmm.
where you encourage them. It has to be done with them, right? You can't do the
Yeah.
content for them when it's
Yeah.
their personal brand. How do you navigate that?
It's hard because people see it, putting out content as just a bulletin board, and if I put up more flyers on the bulletin board and cover up and spam the whole city with my flyers on all the bulletin boards, I'm going to move the needle in my business. And that's not the way it works with content creation. Putting, about, I'd say 3 to 5 years ago, when I can't remember, it was Gary Vaynerchuk. He taught a lot about putting out content, documenting, repurposing. And there's so much validity to that, especially a few years ago when there were less creators. It was just like, put out content. I would argue that we've already there, but we're moving into a time where it's not the volume, it's the quality, and being very intentional with how you position yourself and having a creative element to it. So people don't like hearing this because they're not creators first, they're entrepreneurs first. And what they're doing is they're trying to market their business, which is totally understandable. But if you're going to use an entertainment platform, which are what these social channels are, you need to approach it from an entertainment mindset. And I'm not talking about you being a comedian or doing, monologues or anything like that, but approaching it from a storytelling perspective where you understand what captures people's attention and what actually adds value. It's not a bulletin board that you just throw crap up on there and think that you're going to spray and pray and hit somebody. That's not the way it works. In fact, people, I think, are getting really annoyed with that because they're just seeing the same types of things over and over again, and they know the agenda is to get being sold to. I don't like being sold to. You don't like being sold to. We want to be entertained. We want to learn things. And so approaching it from that mindset is vital. If you don't approach it from the mindset, I would say get out of it. Don't make content, do something else. There's other ways that you can market your business, but you either need to adopt that mindset and be able to really dig in and become a storyteller, or hire someone who gets it and can position you that way. But to your point, Phillip, I completely agree with you. That doesn't mean you're like, here, Janet, you're 22 and cute and no TikTok. You can come up with a narrative. No, because people want to connect with the human beings behind the brand, right? So again, if you're not willing, I'm not saying you have to be charismatic and get on camera and whatever, but you have to create entertaining content if you want to stick out.
100%. And do you ever get the rebuttal? Oh, but I'm authentic. I don't want to do the influencer thing. Do you ever come across
It's
that
not
in
about
your
being
work?
an influencer. It's about being effective. The influencer thing is ridiculous. I just had a talk last week, and my main point was going viral means nothing. I've gone viral multiple times before this chair series, and I'm talking like 10 million plus views on some videos, and it did not move the needle in my business. It did not grow my following, none of that stuff. You want to create a consistent body of work that builds upon itself, where you're creating some narrative with your online presence versus wanting to become like an influencer or viral, whatever. None of that matters. That is authenticity. If you think about it, trying to chase trends and do something to catch attention, that's inauthentic. Building a body of work that relates to, your business, your message, how could that not be authentic? My stuff is super well produced. I put a lot of time into it, but it's me through and through. It's 100% Heather Parady. It starts with Heather Parady, and then the tools are added onto it. I don't start with the tools and then try to add Heather Parady there.
I see what you're doing now. You're not only a content creator, right? You also are a fractional COO.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I gather in my notes about you, how did you come to that? Because what I see even before that was mental health therapy. So what was the most challenging thing about making that transition over? Because some people think, well, I'll just be a mental health therapist and my content, since that's what I do.
Yeah.
And then that's where they stay. And but you made the transition and the leap over to where now you're speaking. You have a podcast, Unconventional Leaders, that you're launching that
Mhm.
you've been doing really well with, had some
Mhm.
amazing guests on. How
Mhm.
did that happen?
I'm lucky. I'm in my 30s, and I was born in a time and age where it's normal and cool and okay to shift gears. And I'm so grateful for that, because I talked to folks who were, grew up in a different time and that wasn't acceptable. You went to college, you got a job, and even if you hated it, that was it. We live in such a cool time where you can reinvent yourself. For me, it was not easy reinventing myself because I had to work really hard to get to where I was. I struggled a lot in school. I had to take developmental classes and really struggled academically. So getting a master's and becoming a therapist was a huge deal for me to just overcome my own insecurities about what I could accomplish. So letting go of that was huge. Um, and yeah, the business changes and shifts. I mean, it's adjusted over and over again, and it should, because there's this idea my friend Rory talks about, skill stacking, and a lot of entertainers will, they don't just study acting, they study, crossbow, and they become boxers. They do this because they carry all these skills and stuff into their careers. And as entrepreneurs, business people, we're constantly picking things up. And so your business should change. You should evolve. I mean, unless you're wanting to scale something and exit, which I have no interest in doing, that's not my cup of tea. There should be a little bit of shift in Heather every once in a while. And I'm guarantee you there will be another 5 years. I hope to God.
I think there will. And so when you landed on fractional COO, what was the
Mm.
vision there?
I'm good at finishing crap, and people aren't. I don't mean that like in a derogatory way, but there's a lot of people who have a lot of vision and dreams and ideas, but actually putting it on paper and having a plan and putting it across the finish line, I'm exceptionally good at that. It's my greatest strength and my greatest weakness too, because it keeps me back a lot. Because as I'm trying to tap more into my creativity and my silliness and the human side, a lot of that type A Heather organizational stuff comes out, which kind of combats that energy. But man, I people needed it. When I started off in business, I left therapy and just started doing freelance work. I'd take any freelance work that I could. I'd take your headshots. I would edit your video. I would produce your podcast. Heather, do you do this? Absolutely, I do it. You know what I mean? Like, I learned it and just started building up those skill sets. And as things started to evolve and people started trusting me more, I started getting involved in strategy. And then I started seeing this huge need for visionaries specifically, to have somebody come alongside them, lock arms, and be able to put a plan together for what they were seeing. And then also be able to translate what they were seeing to their team. So a big gift that I think I have is communication. So you, Phillip, tell me what you're visioning and seeing. I hear you and I can understand you, and then I can help you figure out how to actually move the needle forward with that.
A synthesizer and an optimizer,
Yeah,
in a sense.
you said it better,
No, no, no.
ironically.
I only say that because I have a similar way that my head works where
Yeah,
I listen to what people say and I'm like, oh, you're saying this. It's quite literally what just took place right now,
that's
right?
what a therapist does.
It's a listening skill, isn't it?
Skill stacking.
So
Yeah.
then at some point you start getting invited to speak. How do you
Hmm.
approach that? Because so many people in business, there's two things they always want to eventually do, right? I want to write a book and I want to be a public speaker. What was that like for you? Was it something that was born out of necessity or was it always on your list?
This is me, and this is going to be harsh. I My focus is doing something where people come ask me to speak instead of me chasing after speaking. I want to create something and build something and do something that creates enough of a ripple effect where that stuff is sought out, if that makes sense. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing outreach or really running after that, but I see a lot of folks before they have done a lot wanting to chase the stage. And I get that. Also, too, it's scary being up there and you really better freaking bring it, And yes, motivation is great and so forth. There's a lot of that in when I speak. but also too, I mean, I even told somebody the other day, last week when I was speaking, it was an honor and I really loved it. But I'm like, man, before I speak again, which is just in a few months, I really want to focus on outcome and delivering things and actually producing something worthy of being on that stage. You know what I mean? So I think we live in a time, and it's not none of our faults. It's just the culture that we live in, where a lot of our worth is what stages are you on, what platforms are you given, and not enough conversation about earning those platforms and doing something worth being invited to speak.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. Everyone's quick to jump the gun. The same thing with social media. Like you said, you, when you created the chair series, you sat down and told yourself, I'm going to make these videos with
Yeah.
the intention in mind of figuring out where I want to go with things.
Yeah.
And was it a matter of essentially seeing what was getting traction, or were you more dedicated to what am I saying that actually resonates with me? Or was it a mix?
I sat next to the guy who runs Goldcast from
Yeah.
Facebook. It's a huge media company,
Yeah.
on an airplane several years ago. And I was very annoying. I was one of those people where I found out who he was and I had a 2 hour flight with him. Poor dude was trying to sleep and I hammered him with questions because I'm like, if I'm going to sit next to you, somebody who's in the media business, who's built something so badass, sorry. One of the things he told me their story where, and I'm going to get to your question, where they had an idea for the way that something was supposed to look. I think it was an app that they were going to put out. Well, the videos that they made to advertise that app were popping more than the app was. And so they started paying attention. And he said something along the lines of like, pay attention to where things are naturally flowing. He said it's something way better than that. But with content, I've been trying to do the same thing. I think to earlier's point, it's important to put out stuff and put out stuff and put out stuff, but also pause and just really tuning in of like, what is working here? Now, obviously you can look at the data from that, but also too, from kind of like a human gut perspective and a response. I look at people's comments way, way more than anything else. And to me, that is the biggest hint that something's working. So when I put out my first chair video, it felt really good, but the quality of my comments immediately went up. So it wasn't just like heart emoji, it was like a paragraph. People would send me a DM with a really thoughtful response. And even though my views, I think on that first video was only like 4,000 or something, it wasn't even that then. I think it was like 1,500. It's like 4,000 now. My very first video. I knew I was onto something because that little whisper that he was talking about on that airplane was there, those comments. And so that's what I've been chasing ever since is those comments. Sometimes videos will do really well number wise, but if I don't have a lot of comments in it, that's not a success to me.
Now, the interesting part is it's one thing to be a creator in front of a camera and you're talking into the camera. That in itself is a skill, right? Then you got public speaking and you're doing that. Then you move into launching your own show in a long form discussion. Now, having spoken to you for as long as we have even now, I can already tell why that's successful. There's a lot of thoughtfulness to the way you communicate and you do things really intentionally. But was it an easy transition for you? Part of the course, you were like, look, now I've got to launch a show. There's the next level that I need to achieve. What did that look like to launch the Unconventional Leaders podcast for you?
Podcasting came first for me. Like I said, about however many years ago, I started a show. I've done 4 shows, over 1,000 episodes. Some shows completely flopped, other ones killed. So I've been in love with podcasting for years. I love long form conversation. Hashtag former therapist, but no, man, that was never like out of the, that's always been the thing. You know what I mean? Having long form conversation. At this point, I don't care if anybody's listening to it because I enjoy it so much. I think I put more, ironically, emphasis on the short form content right now than the podcast, as far as like a worrying about the metrics and getting better and better at it. The podcast for me is an opportunity to grow. And man, some of the people I've been able to connect with is just sick. So it's really a selfish pursuit, which is terrible content advice. Like, don't follow that strategy at all. If you want to grow your show, niche down, like hardcore. And there's a lot we could talk about with that, but yeah.
No, and that's what I'm saying is I love that when you know the rules the way that you do, you can buck traditions and say, I'm going to do this, and that's a completely selfish
Yeah.
endeavor for you. I think
Yeah.
that's when you've really reached a place that's a good place because it allows you to enter into that authentic space. And it's exciting to hear that from someone that knows where things are supposed to be clearly
Yeah.
through your track record. So if you don't mind, I want to look into what it's like working with you because I know that the people who are listening, when they look you up, they're going to see your track record, they're going to see what you've accomplished. Who are you interested in working with fundamentally, and what do you invite them into as far as an engagement?
I'm shifting a lot right now. It's funny, when I first started off, it was just like hard finding leads and getting people in the door, and now I'm like overwhelmed with it, where um trying to scale back service-based offerings and getting way more selective with the people that we work with. And I don't know if you've ever read E-Myth. E-Myth just struck me.
Yeah,
And
Michael
it's such a
Gerber.
freaking,
Yeah.
yeah, such a good book. I read that last year, and, approaching things from more of a CEO perspective, and figuring out how to build something that doesn't need you. When you build a business around your superpower, which for me is getting stuff done, it's been interesting figuring out how to exit out of that and pass it on to somebody else. So, who am I looking to work with right now? Honestly, I'm looking for more relationships and DMs and people in my community to talk about creation. I don't have an offer around that. I don't care to have an offer around that right now. To me, I'm a creator right now who's trying to figure it out. And I see a lot of people really struggling where they want to create, but they haven't made the link in their mind between storytelling and content creation. And that's what I'm really interested in talking about right now with folks. So if that's somebody who's like interested in that side of things, I mean, send me a DM. I may not answer for a while because I'm terrible at DMs, but I'm trying to get better.
Well, I imagine at some point it gets a little like it turns into a full-time job in itself, very
Yeah.
similar to email. No, and I thank you for that transparency because it's funny when I read the E-Myth, I immediately wanted to quit because I realized I did everything wrong.
Dude,
I
me
was like,
too.
what's going on?
It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So you talked about community, and that was something I actually wanted to get into at some point before the conversation went on too long, and that is many think just like social media. They go, okay, I'm going to build my community, and then from there, I'm going to bring it into my business.
Mm.
Uh, What are your thoughts on community? And have you found that people are thinking about it in the wrong way, or are there just a few things that they're looking at that they need to shift?
I'm like laughing. It's like, if people think about it the wrong way, yeah. Man, and I go back to Uncle G with this. Like, he talks about it all the time. Like, people see community as um, some people to sell to. It's like, hey, I'm going to create a product. And we saw this huge, like, when the Web3 space with like NFTs and all that. They're like, oh my God, I'm going to launch a project. So it's time for me to build my community. I'm like, oh, when are you launching? They're like, in 2 weeks. I'm like, are you freaking joking, Paul? It's a commitment. It's a marriage. It's a lifelong thing. And I mean, the community that I have now, they have been with me through, Heather hosting a mental health podcast and doing periscopes and doing TikToks. And some of these people are still hanging around this many years later. That's building a community, somebody you build really. I mean, think of real life, Philip. If I wanted to be in community with you, and I show up at your door and I'm like, yo, Philip, we're going to be besties. I'm like, we're going to go get coffee tomorrow. And you're like, cool. And then I just don't show up the next day. You'd be like, F her. Right. And then if I pop in, sometimes I'll pop out. Like, we don't treat each other that way in real life when we're trying to build relationships. So we do that on the digital side because we don't see them as humans. We see them as numbers. Right. So yeah, community building is really, really hard. There's an excellent book. I had it here. It's called, damn it, what is it called? Doing Things Together, I think. Yeah, Doing Things Together. It's an orange book, and it's the best community building book I've ever read. It's
Really?
so good. It breaks down entering into a community, onboarding, nurturing community, events, social media ideas, and then offboarding and building up leaders within your community. It is fire, that book. All together, something together. It's an orange book. Y'all look it up on Amazon. But yeah, that and Tribes by Seth Godin. That's
Oh
another phenomenal
yeah.
book. Yeah.
Yeah. One that I recently came across was The Business of Belonging. If you haven't heard of that one, definitely
Hmm.
something to check out. I'll toss you the info along the way. But I mean, you and I have that in common. We're avid readers as well, right?
Hmm.
Communicators. Like what I love most about your career so far is not only do you have the visibility and the track record to carry weight to the things that you say, but you're also trying to, as much as possible, remove all these hacks that people are putting into like what it means to do these. These are the rules, and really trying to bring a sense of humanity to things. This is what I'm learning as I'm talking to you. Where does that come from? Is it because of what you've gone through? And I don't mean to get too deep. You don't have to answer
I
this.
love
I'm
going deep.
curious.
Dude, like I would like let's go here now forever. Amen. Like this is the thing. None of this other's like where does it come from? It comes from me experiencing it and seeing so many people have normal human reactions to unnatural things. What we're doing here on the internet is not natural. It's weird. I don't know how old you are, but my
35.
parents, 35, okay, I'm 37. We're the first generation to figure out what it means to be a human on the internet. Of course, we don't have it figured out. We weren't born understanding digital identity and how to create a persona and what's the boundaries there and how to leverage that and somehow be authentic and then still need to scale things and whatever. Everything we're doing is awesome and cool and has changed my life, but it's also normal and okay to be burnt out, frustrated, confused. And I love tips and tricks and hacks, and I'm constantly learning and studying this stuff because to me it's interesting. But we've based so much of what we're making in that space that we've lost touch with the real connector, which is the state of being lit up. And I guarantee you, you would rather watch a video, listen to a podcast of somebody who is lit on fire about whatever they're talking about. That passion is going to be so much more attractive to you than somebody who's using the right hashtags and maybe has the perfect camera set up. Like we can feel the energy. And I've just really been fighting to bring like the energy back at the forefront because that's what we're all desperate for. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, how do I get back into content creation? They were like kind of frustrated. They've had a lot of bad experiences. Things weren't working. And there was just like this weight and this pressure on them. And they were looking for me to tell them some strategy to re-enter into the online space. And I told her, I said, I want you to spend the next couple of weeks getting re-lit up about your passion and why you love this industry. Screw social media, screw the digital side, get relit up because that's what we need on the internet, not more hacks.
Beautiful. And I think as we begin to close things out, one thing I wanted to make sure I was able to ask you about, given your experience, is many people treat all social channels the same way. They literally throw up the same content
Yeah.
with the same copy, right? And so it's not about hacks or tricks that I'm asking, but just real perspective. Fundamentally, the people who are listening are likely going to be on LinkedIn. They don't always see Instagram as the business driver. But then again, as we covered earlier in our conversation, that's probably part of the problem is they're looking at it from that perspective. So
Mhm.
how do you look at channels when you're looking at a strategy? Just broad strokes.
I think the ideal situation, if you have the bandwidth and the means, is to create unique content for each platform. That is ideal. Now, a lot of people aren't in that position. I'm not. I mean, I have two people on my team and I'm still struggling to keep my head above water. It's like still trying to figure out our balance there with business and content and all that. Like, it's wild how much time goes into stuff. So, the philosophical right answer is every platform is its own party, its own culture, its own language. I think it's better if you can't do all of them uniquely to lead with one and study it and understand it and do really, really well on it. I wouldn't be upset and offended for you to take that and repurpose it in other places just for the hell of it. One interesting thing, I was really focused on TikTok a few years ago. The video that I mentioned that hit 10 million plus views, it was an actual series that I did. They did really, really well. I made that for TikTok and I said, oh, what the hell? I'm going to throw that up on Facebook real quick. Well, it popped on Facebook. It had like 2,000 views on TikTok, which was my main platform, and me just randomly repurposing it to Facebook. It popped there. Now, granted, it was the right content for Facebook now that I'm looking back on it, but I'm not offended by it. It's not the best strategy. Just understand you need to lead with one because that's going to help you position your content better because you understand the platform you're making it for.
Incredible. And just before I roll out the red carpet and ask you where you want people to go, I lost my train of thought listening to your answer to that one right there. But
I'm losing my train of thought with that cute dog behind you. I've been
oh
staring at his
yeah.
face this whole time.
So I'm very lucky. I've been able to rescue over 5 dogs during the pandemic. And just it was something my fiance is really she cares about.
Mm,
And I had never done that, but I learned, I've always loved dogs, but I really learned a lot about what it takes. And that right there is Milo. He's a Chihuahua dachshund and, courageous guy. Funny though, because he totally prefers women over men. I don't know what
it's
he was
so
doing living
funny.
with me. And someone saw pictures of dogs that I was posting and they decided to send me that just as a gift.
That's so sweet.
They're an amazingly talented graffiti artist and they made that just for me. And honestly,
That's so kind.
for the life of me, I wish I could mention them. I can't right now remember his name, but he's definitely awesome. And I guess I'll make that clip and share it just on the strength. But I thank you
Very
for
cute.
noticing that because I take it you love dogs.
Man, we're in this like deep conversation and it's so funny like to get weird and woo on you. I'm just like looking at this dog's face and just remembering like none of it matters, that I love the online space. Like it exposed me to another world. It brought me out of something really dark. I never would have been able to dream that there was another option for me in this life in the path that I was on. So I'm indebted to it forever, but I also just laugh so much because how much I take it seriously and forget that life is outside of that window and the people across the street and that sweet little dog's face behind you. And like, yeah, it's a cool tool, but let's not make that the life. And I have such a hard time remembering that. And that dog's been reminding me, just like, Heather,
Oh,
let
you know,
loosen up a little bit. It ain't that serious.
Milo is the best. And I just remembered what I wanted to ask you that was
Yep.
related to that other question is before we roll out the red carpet for you. And that is some people take it so serious, this
Hmm.
social media and digital marketing, that they start to create these cohorts where they all follow each other around and comment and engage on each other's content. What are your thoughts on that? Because I personally feel this actually hurts what you're doing more than helps, but
It's
maybe I'm
dumb.
wrong.
I'm gonna be rude, man. Like, what are you doing? If I have to, like, it's kind of like I made a pizza restaurant and you made a pizza restaurant and somebody else did too, and we're all like, you know what? Let's do a circle and we're gonna all eat at each other's pizza restaurant, and we're creating an echo chamber where it's nice, but are we really making an impact in the city if we're not going out and marketing to other people and other people choosing to come to our pizza restaurant? Now people will argue like, oh, well, it helps the algorithm. No, it doesn't. Get creative. Like spend the energy and time that you're doing trying to hack the system and, doing these little pods, and spend that time writing and coming up with creative ideas and learning a new technique with filming. I'm so sick of like regurgitated bull crap everywhere, the same stuff. And it's like we're trying to like gnaw at each other to please somebody see me, please somebody see me, please somebody see me, and hack into something versus becoming a person of value. No offense to these pod people, but it doesn't. Is that the kind of traction you want? Is that the way that you want to win?
Yeah. Thank you for that. And now I want to roll out the red carpet for you, as they say, the proverbial red carpet. Where do you want people to connect with you? Where do you want them to stay in touch with you?
Listen to the show Unconventional Leaders and find me over on Instagram at Heather Parady.
Heather, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks. This was fun.
Same for real.